Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we will discuss a module from Indian aesthetics, and this module is on Rajshekhara and his contribution to Indian poetics. Poetics deals with the theory of literature. Indian poetics evolved out of dramaturgy. Bharata's Natya Shastra is the earliest known treatise on poetics and dramaturgy. Many scholars have contributed rich literature on poetics in classical Sanskrit. Bharata's Natya Shastra mentions four alankaras or poetic figures, 10 gunas or excellences, 10 doshas or defects, and 36 lakshanas or characteristics of poetic composition. In Indian poetics, scholars had different viewpoints, so they formed different sampradayas or school of thoughts. The chief schools of Indian poetics are like school of Alamkara or poetic figure school, Rasa school or aesthetics pleasure, Riti or style school, Guna or attribute school, Dhvani or suggestion school, Vakrokti or obliquity school, Anumana or inference school, and Auchitta or propriety school. Now, let us have brief discussion about all these schools, and then we will come to the discussion of Rajshekhara's contribution to Indian poetics. Bharata's Natya Shastra is the earliest work on Alamkara now preserved. After Natya Shastra, the earliest works on Alamkara are Kavya Darsa of Dandri and Kavya Tairikara of Bhamaha. It is very difficult to decide the relative priority of Bhamaha and Dandi. Most probably both of them belong to 7th century AD. He stresses the importance of Alankaras by bringing everything that beautifies the Kavya under the general term Alamkara. We may presume that the Alamkara Shastra started as a separate technical discipline from about the commencement of the Christian era and probably flourished in a relatively developed form in the 5th and 6th centuries AD. Now, Rasa school of poetry. Bharata may be called as the originator of Rasa school of poetry. He laid stress on the elements of rasa, which became in course established idea in the realm of poetics. In his book Natya Shastra, Bharata mentioned Natya Rasa rather than Kavya Rasa. But Bharata's doctrine of Natya Rasa, the original source of the doctrine of Kavya Rasa. Rudrat was the earliest writer who explicitly included rasa in his treatment of poetics, but he devoted 4 chapters on rasa. At the beginning of his work, Kavya Lankara, he praised the poets who have won eternal fame by composing kavyas enlivened by rasa. Rudrat, in his theory of poetry, stresses on Alamkara, but he discusses rasa also. Lollat, Shankuka, Vattanayaka, and others are also associated with rasa doctrine. Anandavardhana maintains that no system of poetics can entirely ignore the moods and sentiments as essential factors in poetry. He therefore gives an important place for rasa in his scheme. Abhinavagupta declared rasa as the essence of poetry. Vishwanath and Keshava Mishra have suggested rasa as essential, the main element of poetry. Now, Riti school of poetry. The precursor of Riti school may be called Dandin, the author of Kavya-darsa. The doctrine of Riti as the essence of poetry was further developed by Vamana. He wrote Kavyalankara Sutra. In 5 chapters of his book, he strongly supported the doctrine of Riti. He regarded Riti as the soul of poetry. He defines the Riti as particular arrangement of words. The Riti is not like the style as it is generally understood by Western critics, but as literary excellence. The sabda or word and the artha or sense or meaning constitute the body of which the soul is the Riti. Guna school of poetry. Vamana developed the doctrine of guna and classified guna into 2 types, sabda gunas and artha gunas. Although Bharata's gunas are mostly of the nature of artha gunas and some of poem can be interpreted as by Abhinavagupta as shabda gunas. Shabda gunas means the qualities pertaining to word from and artha guna means quality as pertaining to word meaning. Dandi apparently holds that it is not the poetic figures only, but the several literary excellences, the gunas, that constitute the essence of poetry. Dhwani school of poetry. Dhwani school of poetry may be regarded as meaning school. The doctrine of Dhani is suggestion is the essence of poetry. This school was formulated by Anandavardhana, who wrote Dharnaloka in the middle of the 9th century. The Dharnaloka is divided into 4 chapters called Uddotas. Anandavardhana has borrowed the term Dhwani from the field of grammar. The grammarians supplied the nomenclature and the intellectual speculation on the words and their senses provided the foundation of Dhwani doctrine. Now, the Vakrokti school of poetry. Vakrokti doctrine represents one of the most outstanding contribution to poetic theory. The term Vakrokti means crooked speech. The earliest traces of the Vakrokti doctrine can be found in Bharata's Natya Shastra. But the pioneer of Vakrokti school of poetry was Kuntaka. He was the author of Vakrokti Jivita. The idea of Kuntaka's doctrine of Vakrokti is that the Vakrokti is the essence of poetry. The 2 other scholars who have referred the term Vakrokti before Kuntaka are Anandavardhana and Rajshekhara. Anandavardhana considers Vakrokti as an expressed figure or Vachya-lankara. Rajshekhara has called the figure Vakrokti by the name of Auktika, pertaining to statement or saying. Anumana school of poetry. Anumana school of poetry is associated with the name of Mahimabhatta. He wrote Vyakti Viveka. His object was to comprehend all ideas of Dhwani in the process of Anuman or syllogistic reasoning. He discussed 2 senses of Sabda, namely the actually expressed or Vachya and the inferable or Anumeya. Anumeya includes both the Lakshya and Vyangya senses. The process of inference is very wide in its scope, much wider than Dhwani. Auchitya school of poetry. Auchitya school of poetry is associated with the name of Kshemendra. The doctrine of Auchitya was originated and developed by Kshemendra. Kshemendra wrote two works, Auchitya Vichara and Kavi Kanthavarana. Kshemendra considers Auchitya as the essence of rasa or rasa jivita bhuta, and as having its foundation in the aesthetic pleasure or chamatkara, underlying the relish of rasa. In his opinion, Auchitya has its application in various parts of a poem, such as pada or word, vakya or sentence, prabandhartha or composition as a whole, gunas or literary excellences, alamkaras or poetic figures, the rasas or sentiments, kriya or verb, karaka or case, linga or gender, number or vachana, upasarga or prefixes, desha place, and kala time, etc. Now, let us talk about this theory and the Indian poetry. Poetry in India, of course, is very ancient and has been in vogue even from the Vedic times. In the context of Rig Veda, Kavi refers to one who through his intuitional perception or pratibha sees the unseen. Kavihi kranta darshano bhavati. Kavihi kranta darshano bhavati. And gives expression to his vision or darshana spontaneously through words. He is the wise seer. It was said, one cannot be a kavi unless one is a rishi. Nan rishi rikurute kavyam. However, not all rishis are kavis. A kavi is a class by himself. But the kavi, the poet, we are referring to in the series, and here is not the Vedic kavi. He is far different from the Vedic kavi in almost every aspect, and is vastly removed from him in space, time, environment, attitude, objective, etc. And his poetry is neither a rik nor a mantra, but is a cultivated art ornate with brilliance and flashing elegance. The Sanskrit poet who creates kavya is neither a rishi nor a seer, but he is very much a person of the world who has taken up writing as a profession to earn his living. He usually sprang from a class that possessed considerable cultural refinement, and Sanskrit being the language of the academia and the medium of his work, he was well versed in handling it. He is urban, educated, and is usually employed in the service of a king. Apart from writing classy poetry, his other main concern is to please and entertain his patron. He is very much a part of the inner circle of the court and is surrounded by other poets and scholars who invariably are his close rivals in grabbing the king's attention and favors. During those times, a great king would usually have in his service a number of poet scholars who vied with each other to keep the king happy and pleased. Their main task was to entertain the king. Apart from such court poets, there were a large number of wandering birds who sang for the common people. They walked through towns and villages singing songs of love and war. Of course, their recitations were not classy or of the standard of the court poet singers. As Vatsayana in his Kama Sutra describes, the court poet generally is an educated, suave gentleman of leisure, having refined taste and versatility, fairly well off, lives in urban surroundings or Nagara or Nagarika, loves to dress well, bit of a dandy, indeed smearing himself with sandal paste, fragranting his dress with agaru smoke fumes, and wearing flowers. Appreciates art, music, and good food, and love his occasional drink in the company of friends and courtesians. A court poet sometimes is also portrayed as rather vain, nursing a king's seized ego and desperately yearning to be recognized and honored as the best among all the poets in the royal court. Thus, his attitude finds expression in various ways, outwardly or otherwise. The dress, polished manners, and cosmetics all seem to matter. But more importantly, it seemed necessary to have a sound educational foundation, idioms of social etiquette, and a devotion to classical literature or sahitya, music or samgita and other fine arts or lalita kala. Though his poetry was developed in the court, its background was in the society at large. Rajshekhara was an eminent scholar, critic, and poet, was the court poet of the Gurjara or Pratihara king Mahendrapala 880 to 920 AD, who ruled over Magadha. In his Kavya Mimamsa, which is virtually an handbook guiding aspiring poets, Rajshekhara outlines the desirable or the recommended environment, lifestyle, daily routine, dispositions, etc. for a poet, as also the training and preparations that go to make a good poet. Sanskrit Kavya in middle and the later periods grew under the patronage of royal courts, and sometime the king himself would be an accomplished scholar or a renowned poet. And it didn't happen only for the Sanskrit. We know about the Sadvahana king Hala, who himself was poet and collected the gathas, gaha, from the different villages, from the poets of his region, and published and made, not published, and made Gaha Satyasai. According to Rajshekhara, many of the poets depended on the patronage of local rulers and kings. Among them, the more eminent ones were honored as court poets or Asthana Kavi. Those who performed brilliantly endeared themselves to the king and were richly rewarded. There was therefore a fierce rivalry among the poets in the king's court to perform better than the next poet and somehow be the king's favorite. A successful poet would usually be a good speaker with a clear voice, would understand the language of gestures and movements of the body, and would be familiar with other languages, arts as well. An archetypal picture of a poet that Rajshekhara presents is very interesting. The Kavi here usually lives in upper middle class society that is culturally sensitive. His house is kept clean and comfortable for living. He moves from places, changing his residence about 3 times in an year according to the seasons. His country residence has private resting places surrounded by antelopes, peacocks, and birds such as doves, chakoro, karuncha, and such other. The poet usually has a lover apart from his wedded wife to whom he addresses his love lyrics. As regards the daily life of the poet, Rajshekhara mentions the Kavi would usually be a household, following a regulated way of life, such as worshipping at the beginning of each day, followed by study of works on poetics or other subjects or works of other poets. All these activities are, however, preparatory. They stimulate his innate power of creativity and imagination or pratibha. His creative work, proper kavya kriya, takes part in the second part of the day. Towards the afternoon, after lunch, he joins his other poet friends or Kavi Goshti, where they indulge in verse riddle games structured around question answers or Prashna Uttara. Sometimes the poet discusses with close friends the work he is presently engaged with. In the evening, the poet spends time socializing with women and other friends, listening to music or going to the theatre. The second and the third parts of the night are for relaxation, pleasure, and sleep. Of course, not all poets followed a similar routine. Each had his own priorities, yet they all seemed to be hardworking, valuing peace, quiet, and the right working conditions. There were also those who chose to write when moved or inspired or during their leisure. They were, as Rajshekhara calls them, occasional poets or Data Vasara. Among them was a class who wrote only on occasions or Tanika or Prayojanika to celebrate certain events. Rajshekhara also mentions of those poets who are totally devoted to their poetic work. They invariably shut themselves from daylight or Asuriam Pasha, dwelling in caves or remote private homes away from sundry noises and other disturbances. As regards the poet's writing materials and other tools, Rajshekhara mentions that the writing materials are almost always within the reach of the poet and are contained in a box. The contents of the box were generally a slate and chalk, a stand for brushes and inkwells, dried palm leaves or tadapatra or bircha bark or vurjapatra, and an iron stylus or kantaka. The common writing materials were palm leaves on which letters were sketched with metal stylus. The alternate writing surface was the birch bark cut into broad strips. The slate and chalk was for preparatory or draft work. Rajshekhara, just prior to Abhinavagupta, had also emphasized the importance of training and preparation in the making of a poet. He treats the subject in a little more detail. He mentions that the cultivator of Sanskrit poetry, variously known as Kavi, Buddha, or Vidyan, is not born as poet, nor is he self-taught. Anyone gifted with talent or pratibha to create poetry and determined to become a poet should be prepared for detailed education or utpatti spread over long years of hard work or avyoga prayatna, study or abhyas with ceaseless dedication or shraddha. He should have the strength of mind not to be enticed away from his chosen path and should pursue the study of Kavya in all its forms and layers with single pointed or ekagra devotion. Rajshekhara remarks, there is no merit in becoming half-baked poet. If one is truly sincere to his intention, then one should strive to become a professional poet of true class. He should make that as his life ambition, the ultimate goal in his life, and should be prepared to make whatever sacrifices it demands. The ardent learner is advised to seek guidance from a professional, learned teacher or upadhyaya and study under him the basic subjects of phonetics such as Vyakarana or grammar, Nirukta or etymology, Kosha or lexicon, Alamkara or ornamentation, and Chandas or poetic meters, along with standard works on Kavya Shastra or poetics. Apart from studying these subjects individually, they should be studied with special reference to classic works of Kavya that have been written according to the formats and disciplines prescribed in text of Kavya Shastra. The study of the works of the master would help the student to gain wholesome appreciation of the poetic process, the techniques of various forms of poetry and their components such as meter or chandas, grammar, vyakarana, embellishments, alamkara, etc. He should try out the principles he learnt by applying them to practice poems or avyasakriti to be crafted as a part of his learning process. The training included exercise to improve the standard, improve the students' literary and the non-literary vocabulary, use of right words, picking the apt terms among the various synonyms, developing metrical skill, finding the various synonyms, finding the most appropriate expression for each attribute, the most suitable simile, etc., and creating verbal structure according to syntax within the rhythmic framework. The preparation and the training would also include gaining familiarity with various branches of learning such as art or kala, music or sangita, erotics kamashastra, logic or nyaya, statecraft or arthashastra, as also of the natural world of mountains, oceans, trees, birds and animals, etc. He could also gain an understanding of science, astronomy, gemology, etc. and of course familiarity with such important sources of literary material as the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata as well as with the Puranas was also essential. The object of such elaborate training was to ensure that the student learned to work at his text in a deliberate manner, respecting the host of rules and norms that govern Kavya, and also to ensure that his poetic compositions grow out of a clear thought process based on a free but carefully made choice of all the elements. Far more important was the organization and coordination of these elements to give the composition the quality of a work of art. Thus, at the end, very little would separate the connoisseur and critic from the writer of Kavya. So, from this discussion, we can understand that Rajshekhara's Kavya Mimamsa is not only about the theory of poetry, but it is a handbook, a course guideline for the poets that how to be a good poet. But this is not only the contribution of Rajshekhara. There is his main contribution. I mean, one among the principal contribution of Rajshekhara is his concept of Kavya Purusha, which is later adapted by Ganesh Devi and Sujit Mukherjee to propose the methodology, the historiography of Indian literature. Ganesh Devi, in his Of Many Heroes, he write an article on Kavya Purusa, and the Nayaka of our history is not one but multiple. The history should represent the plurality, the multiple voices of the communities. And this message comes from the idea of Kavya Purusha of Rajshekhara, what adapted by Ganesh Devi in his Of Many Heroes to propose the historiography of Indian literature. But not only Ganesh Devi, Shujit Mukherjee also had adapted this Kavya Purusha for the literary history. So not only about the theory of poetry or the training out source book of the poets, but also the historiography, the concept of history we can find from the idea of Kavya Purusha of Rajashekhara, which may help us to write elaborate and plural history of Indian literature. So this concept of Kavya Purusha also is kind of metaphor which can be decoded and can be used for the historical writing, for writing history of Indian literature. All the detailed references, footnotes and bibliography you can find in eText. For detailed discussion, you can consult the eText here. Thank you.